The Hedgeless Horseman here. I'm doing a follow-up video on my, I guess sentiment slash growth series, where I try to show just how much of the movements in the stocks, etc., are driven by sentiment and not the underlying value. And I've, recently looked at Great Bear as a good example of this, where we recently saw a takeover bid from Kinross at I think around $29 per share, which might actually go higher. And I highlighted the fact that even for a superb exploration story like this, you have these oscillations due to sentiment, overall sector sentiment, etc., and profit taking. And you will have peaks and you will have bottoms that have nothing really to do with the underlying value, because I doubt, for example, that Great Bear's intrinsic value trended down for 497 days, and then all of a sudden 3 months later it went up 122%. That just doesn't make any sense. So if it was probably worth around here when it was trading down here, and you can see this phenomena all over the place. So today I'm going to be looking at Novo Resources, which has certainly taken a hammering lately. It's probably one of the worst looking charts out there. And I mean, there are a few obvious observations one can make. First of all, that I've laid on GDXJ here. You can see, I mean, a lot of the tops and bottoms, etc., coincide, and GDXJ, and basically 98% of juniors have been in a downtrend since August of last year. And Novo is not an exception. It actually peaked just a few days before. So you have this long downtrending movement, and Novo has done the exact same thing basically, just worse. And same with Newfound Gold. It peaked around this peak and just continued to head down. So I mean, one thing to note here about how important sentiment is, and that the market is, in my opinion, totally clueless about the underlying value on any given day, because this yellow line here is shares of Newfound Gold, which Novo owns 15 million shares of. So I mean, you can see here, for example, I mean, Newfound Gold started to rocket. I mean, so the intrinsic value of Novo rocketed with it. I think it peaked at 200 million, something like that, not 100% sure. So we're talking, more than $100 million move in the underlying shareholdings of Novo, and yet the price declined with the rest of the sector. There is no way that that makes a lot of sense. And then of course it peaked with GDXJ and Newfound Gold, and then it headed down. So up here, I mean, the sentiment broke or hit a peak in Newfound Gold, so that also continued to make another one of these sentiment lows basically. And like always, history is irrelevant. I mean, I think a lot of people, look in the rear view mirror to form an opinion of a company. It's like, how many people had, the fortitude, let's say, to buy Great Bear here after a downtrend like this? Because if you believe the market is correct, you would think that, okay, things have been going south for Great Bear, so why should I buy now? Nothing has happened for 1.5 years. Why on earth should I buy this stock? Because the market is telling me that everything is going south. And the same thing could be seen here. Here, obviously, the flash crash. And then all of a sudden, it went up 122% in 3 months. Again, nothing to do really with value. If I had to guess, I think that value just kept on increasing. So the value to price gap just widened. So the buying opportunity just became better and better and better as sentiment got worse and worse and worse. And then the revaluation happened. If we look at Novo, there's a whole laundry list of negative sentiment or factors affecting sentiment, and which of course creates a spiral because nothing changes sentiment as much as price. We saw that on the other way in 2017. Price went up, got more people bullish, which pushed up price more, which got even more people bullish. Then the sentiment peaked and expectations were sky high, and when reality didn't meet expectations, you go from a peak in sentiment to a crash in sentiment. And I mean, again, the value didn't the intrinsic value or expected value doesn't swing like this. So it's probably, it was very overvalued based on what we knew back then, and then it crashed all the way back here. So I mean, you can and you can see that here as well. Here it goes up 89% and down 47%. I mean, the expected value of the business doesn't swing like that on a few months, let's say, unless it's like a material news event, for example. But like you can see, I mean, it still just basically followed miners overall. So there's, I mean, such a big part of every junior's share price is simply down to sentiment. And now we have, we're in the tax loss selling silly season, which affects every junior and every miner pretty much, because most juniors and miners overall have been on a 15-month downtrend. So you will have artificial selling pressure, which crushes the sentiment even more. And in the case of Novo, we have worries about Kirkland about to dump shares, which obviously is a affects the sentiment negative. So you will have some people who just sell based on tax loss selling. You will have some who sell based on fear of Kirkland Lake dumping shares. There might be worries about GDXJ undergoing a rebalancing, let's say, and takes out Novo. So there's a laundry list of reasons. Some will be more inclined to sell when you add these together, but I mean, maybe some could see the tax loss silly season coming and realize, okay, this is not probably company driven, but what broke the camel's back might be fears of Kirkland Lake dumping, etc. So you can have there's never been more excuses, let's say, to sell Novo right now. I mean, from a psychological perspective, because there's a lot of worries built up, and you have this long downtrend. So everything at face value is telling you, not to buy, not to buy, not to buy. That of course happens every bottom. I mean, even in the best cases around, or the best success stories, there's not a lot of people who have many reasons to buy down here, except for the people that are more value focused, I would say, who realize that, well, I mean, I can buy at the same price as Great Bear was 497 days ago, and they had multiple drill rigs and made discoveries, etc. Of course the value has been going up, and that's when the market goes from a voting machine, short-term voting machine to a weighing machine that's going to reflect it, and that's why, I mean, basically since the discovery you've had these oscillations again. And if you know, just have an estimated value creation trend, you see that it, you know, reaches it or maybe surpasses it, and then it undercuts it and overcuts it, undercuts, and then bam. So, I mean, if I'm looking at Novo right now, sentiment's probably never been worse, and there's never been more, you know, factors, let's say, affecting the sentiment in a negative way. But if you look at the actual underlying company, let's say, take from this point here, for example, here newfound gold started to go up again. So that's probably, you know, a couple of tens of millions in value add. Shares of Novo went down. And then we've had 5 news releases in a relatively short time span. 15,000 RC drilling program at Purnell Vulture Trended Nullagine. This is of course very close to an operating mill, so any ounces found here at face value should be worth multiples relative to the average juniors ounces they're finding. Novo identifies nickel copper targets, and that's between Artemis Resources and Ashore Minerals, or whatever it's called. I think both of those companies have a 100 million market cap or something like that. Obviously right neighborhood, which lines up with the soil sample results, etc. So there's obviously smoke there, so that's got to have some value, obviously. I mean, that's a net positive news release, hands down. And of course you wouldn't drill Purnell Vulture if you didn't think there was potential there, so net positive. Earlier we got the near mine high grade mineralization confirmed 3 kilometers, obviously net positive. New basement gold targets identified at Novo's Egina project. This is basically the Hemi trend they're talking about, where they've, you know, done some grassroots exploration, and it looks like there's, you know, potential for some gold-bearing intrusives. Obviously net positive. It's the right neighborhood on the right trend. Mechanical sorter construction complete ahead of phase 2. This has been, you know, long in coming, let's say. A lot of delays with the ore sorting. But finally, you know, they've completed the construction. Western Australia right now, and Australia overall, is having big problems with, you know, labor and well, I guess transportation of people, because they have basically locked down the entire country. So I think one has to be a bit forgiving that things aren't going as smooth as a lot of companies in Western Australia would like them to go, simply due to the, well, unprecedented measures against COVID. Anyway, so I mean, again, if you look at the actual business, the value, has Novo, for example, gone, you know, this trend, is this correct? Is this reflecting the underlying value? Well, I mean, I don't know how you can really say that, given, you know, first of all, newfound gold's rise. Then you have news releases like this, which, even though there are certainly no guarantees, but, you know, potential should be reflected. And now, for example, I mean, almost all the talk is about BC, the deposit, the nuggety conglomerate deposit. And I think there's, you know, obviously some stuff that's being missed if you only look at that. I mean, they have a portfolio equities, etc., worth around, I think, as of so this time, let's say 118 million Canadian. 118 million Canadian in like, assets, assets or equity assets. There's not a lot of juniors that can say that, so that's quite a cushion. I mean that's not 50% of the market cap, but it's, let's say 30, 35. Then you have, their plans going forward. Again, most people in the market right now, especially because obviously what happens at sentiment lows is that instead of thinking about the upside surprises, how much risk is actually priced in and what is not priced in terms of upside. That's what you should be thinking when things get cheap. Instead, when the market goes down, people are overly focused on risks every single time. Back here, the sentiment was extremely bullish. Mine included. And the discussion is pretty much, how high can it go? And right now, all the discussion is, people throwing out target prices of, 50 cents, zero, bankruptcy, whatever. So it's a race to the bottom compared to here where it was a race to the top. That's not the way I think one should be investing. Because if you have a lot of worries, let's say, if you realize that most of the worries are priced in, and there's like, a multiple avenues for upside surprises, let's say. It's impossible to get greedy at bottoms if you think the market is always right. And then you look, in the rear view mirror and just project things like, okay, it's been going down, so it's going to go down like this. And of course, back at these times, you project it up this, and here you would expect to go down there. You're never going to be able to make outsized returns in the long term if you're always getting increasingly bearish the cheaper something gets, or increasingly bullish the more, let's say, overvalued something becomes. That's obviously, you have to be a bit of a contrarian. And again, it's like even the best stories, even the best success stories have this phenomena as well. They go up and then they go down and then they go up a lot. Like here, for example, a crash and then a superb rally. It's not like the Valley of Great Bear changed this much in this short period of time. There's no way that happened. So it was sentiment that brought it down, and people getting scared shitless down here, selling. And the people that realized that, I think the value trend is actually up here, they were buying. And maybe they got out here, maybe they rode it to, let's say, potential overvaluation. Good for them. But it's like at this point in time, you got to start thinking, okay, how much of the upside is already priced in? And here you should think about how much of the downside is already priced in. So now with Novo, 312 million in market cap. Newfound Gold shares worth 107.7 million. Other investments, let's say 10 million. Cash, about 40 million, I think. And an operating mill, and we have debt as well. I don't know if it's 40 or 50 million. Whatever. Operationally, yes, Novo has risk because we have, debt, etc. And Bearden's Creek hasn't been performing as good as hoped, obviously. But the question, if Bearden's Creek alone could be like, I don't know, neutral or whatever, or basically neutral in cash flow, that's still a, an operating mill. So if you find, or if Novo finds like I don't know, 100 to 300,000 ounces of oxide near the mill, that could be worth a lot of money, and it could turn around, Beaton's Creek, assuming the Beaton's Creek deposit itself doesn't start to get better, or the price of Australian gold price goes up, whatever. So I mean, to be a bear right now is basically, in my opinion, saying that there's an quite a high likelihood of the BC deposit not turning around and taking the company with it, and also banking pretty much that nothing will come out of all of this, and they're not going to find anything here basically, or have success with sorting or whatever before the Beaton's Creek deposit would take down the company. And I'm not a financial guy, let's say, but when you have when you have relatively liquid assets, let's say for 115 million Canadian, that's a big buffer to have. I mean, assuming you could theoretically just shed shares, for example, that could have a negative BC running for quite some time. I mean, theoretically here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that right now we're at the peak was probably a bad word given that it's down, but like the pit of despair, where expectations are extremely low, the market didn't care about, hasn't cared about giving value to newfound gold, it hasn't cared about giving value to any of these targets here, and not and that includes Malmesbury, that includes, again, like Hemi, that includes the oxide targets close to the mill, Talga, sorting, Karatha, any progress at, Egina or whatever. So basically what I'm saying is that right now, in this super depressed junior sector, and in this case Novo specifically, nothing in terms of value creation or upside potential is getting priced in. It's just sentiment driven right now, which feeds on itself and makes people even more bearish. So like back here, when reality didn't meet expectations, the reaction was, pretty incredible. And down here, where expectations are extremely low and everybody's focusing on one tree, which is the BC deposit. I mean, that's I see. I mean, there's a lot of Novo bears out there. That's the only thing they're talking about, and you can see some trolls basically, believe that, well, the current market cap is just based on the BC deposit and the BC operation. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth, obviously. No, I mean, the BC deposit is like a speck on this whole map. So if you think that's 312 million for BC only, then I have no idea how you could ever beat the market, because that's some of the worst due diligence I've ever seen. Well, I guess again, long story short, sentiment is extremely powerful right now. There are a lot of worries that have nothing to do with the fundamentals. I mean, if GDXJ were to rebalance, that's just, selling shares. That's nothing really with the value of the company. Worse of Kirkland dumping. First of all, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's, been bombarded in the forums, etc. To, obviously to scare people. But as a value investor, why would I care if Kirkland Lake sold shares? That makes no sense. It's like if you were focused on the value, that's like, let's say this was, a major shareholder selling shares out of spite or whatever, and the value has kept going up. You would of course see that as a gift, and you can see that in Minera Alamos, for example, right now, where Osisco Development, I think, is dumping shares and basically suppressing the price. I mean, Doug, the CEO, he's buying there, and there are a lot of people buying because they understand that this motivated seller and the way he's been sitting on the price suppressing it has nothing to do with what Minera Alamos is, the underlying value. Let's say if they need cash, they're gonna sell, and if the company keeps on getting better, that means that you're getting a better and better price for and basically front running when the market turns into a weighing machine again. So I mean, are there any guarantees? Obviously not. I mean, there never are any guarantees. But it's like how I look at Novo right now. It's like, okay, either the Beatons Creek deposit is not fixed or whatever, and they're not able to, I don't know, plug the holes long enough for any of these 10 targets or whatever to bear fruit, let's say. So yes, then I expect to actually lose money from here in Novo. But if BC would, let's say, turn around, or they find a few 100,000 ounces or whatever, and if anything else goes right, then I expect to have a multi-bagger in Novo. And given, again, this picture here, if 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6 targets, I mean, whatever, if something goes right, I mean, if they happen to find another Hemi, for example, I mean, that's I think the gray is worth like 2 billion or something. So I mean, you get the picture, and even if there's like a 10% chance of that happening, that would be 200 million. If there's a 1% chance of that happening, that's still 20 million in expected value. So again, to harp on, I mean, this is sentiment. GDXJ share price doesn't reflect the value of the business itself. Miners are doing record cash flow. Does this look like, going back to these levels, does this look like a sector that reflects, near record cash flows? Of course not. Newfound Gold has had nugget problems, obviously, but price is all the way back to here, and they've drilled a lot since then, have like 10 rigs. So it's like the market is often clueless, and especially during tax loss selling season. And in the case of Novo, you have a lot of worries here that has nothing to do with actual value. So I mean, if people sell, if value is even only flat, let's say, and people sell because they fear GDXJ, or they fear Kirkland, or they're just afraid to be in miners right now, whatever. I mean, that's an exponentially increasing opportunity for a buyer who can realize that price can oscillate wildly and will not always track the underlying value. If you thought that the market was always right, you would sell here, buy here, sell here, buy here, going back all the way. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of people, including myself, who's underwater on Novo Resources. But again, like, past performance has nothing to do with, you shouldn't use that as a guide for the future. We're here now. You shouldn't care about what your, let's say, paper loss is or whatever. You should just care about what do you think the value of the company is right now, or the expected value is, and what it might be going forward. And if you think that the market is overly pessimistic about the risk, or overly pessimistic about the future, and provides a good to great risk reward, then you would be obviously a buyer. I mean, back here, for example, in miners, this was the most no-brainer buying opportunity I've ever seen. That's the flash crash. Gold price stayed flat basically. Everything got taken down 50%. I can't imagine what the people who actually sold down here were thinking. They of course will, not beat the market in the long term. Because if you can't realize that a 50% haircut when the actual business didn't really change in value, if you were selling that just makes you the biggest sheep on the planet. And right now, for example, I see some, putting in Cellrex in Novo and perhaps some other shares. I don't get that at all. It's like if you put a Cellrec, you should probably put it at when you're pretty sure it's overvalued, let's say. But again, there are no guarantees. There are scenarios. We can only deal with scenarios, expectations, probability based, let's say. So I simply think that the market is too pessimistic right now in miners, in Newfound Gold, in Novo especially, and I'm buying across the board. I've been picking up some Novo, and I've been picking up 30 other companies or something like that. I don't think this is a time to. You don't need to bet big in a very concentrated portfolio when everything is on sale. When valuations are high, I think you need to be more of a stock picker, because there's going to be a bunch of companies that are actually trading above their intrinsic value, and your job then is to find the ones that does not. And even if, they will be taken down with the sector sentiment as well, but maybe they drop 30%, whereas the overvalued juniors drop 70%. So in that case, you can pretty much, and maybe they become way undervalued instead. So then you can just, value trade basically. You take the 30% loss in your stock pick and then buy into some overly punished juniors, for example. Well, this was a long rant, but this is how I look at the markets overall, as it relates to sentiment, and especially right now Novo. Again, a lot of news releases, and I see people basically, I don't know, they seem to take some pride in like, well, Novo has put out X amount of news releases and the price hasn't responded. That means it's shit. That's just funny to me. That's like, what you're saying is basically at face value. What you're saying is, assuming that you realize that at least these are net positive news releases. What you're saying is that, value is actually going up or at least staying flat while price is going down, and then the implied, let's say, train of thought is basically that, it's bad because price is going down. Again, it makes no sense. Let's take Great Bear. I'm assuming that since it was sold here, the value is up here. So during this period, obviously they were putting out news releases about new discoveries and hits, etc. And price, due to sentiment reasons, still basically traded lower. So if you're looking at that like, price is going down and they're putting out all these news releases, and your conclusion is that, I knew I shouldn't buy that company. There's no way you're one of the 5% that actually beats the market, because you can't even make the simplest connection that, wow, value is increasing, price is decreasing, so the opportunity goes exponential here. And you're sitting there like, wow, they're putting out all these good news, and the price goes down. What a dog. It's like, okay, well, I'd like to see your portfolio returns in 10 years. I'm looking at this as net positive results where expected value is actually increasing, and prices going down. So if I like Novo here, I like it even more here, because I doubt so much has changed for the worse in terms of like BC, for example. And I also expect Newfound Gold to start heading up after after we bottom in miners overall. So if, let's say, Novo does nothing but tread water, and we have Newfound Gold go up to previous highs, so that would be like 200 million. 200 million worth of Newfound Gold shares, and if the market cap for Novo was frozen, that would be 67% of Novo's market cap covered by Newfound Gold shares. So again, I think the I think the risk reward is actually pretty incredible right now, and at the same time, it goes without saying that like 90% of people are not gonna see it that way, and they will have even more reasons not to own it down here than they had of owning it up here or here. Well, that was a long rant. I hope you got something out of it. And as always, I mean, these are my biased personal opinions, and there are no guarantees. I could be totally wrong, and I own shares of Novo Resources as well as Newfound Gold, and the company is a banner sponsor, so consider me biased and don't treat this as investing advice. Yeah, thanks for listening.